Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Relo Network Asia webinar today, focusing on the real estate market in Singapore. Welcome to you all from everywhere around the world. Thank you for joining us today. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues here at Relo Network Asia, Holly and Claudine, who will introduce themselves in a second. Just to let you know that today's presentation will be about 30 to 35 minutes in length before we open up the floor to some questions. If you do have any questions, you can place your questions in the Q&A that should be at the bottom of your screen, right beside the chat box. We will field as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Just another note that this webinar is being recorded. So we, after the event today, probably 1 or 2 days later, we'll be able to send the a recording or a link to the recording for everybody to view. So thank you very much again for joining today. So without further ado, Holly, maybe if you'd like to briefly introduce yourself and your role at Relo Network Asia.
Oh, thank you, Steve. As you can tell, I'm British. I've now lived in Singapore for 12 years. I arrived from Tokyo as an assignee myself in my previous career with Goldman Sachs. I've been working in this industry for 4 years now, and I have worked with many different realtors across all sectors of the Singapore property market. So I look forward to sharing with you today some of my recent experiences.
Thank you. Okay, and Claudine.
Thank you, Steve. I'm a Singaporean. I've lived and worked actually over 12 years in 5 different countries. Being a very devoted trading spouse before, I was really involved in the entire relocation process for my family. This together with some 10 years of experience in the DSP services, would say I have a first-hand experience how to overcome challenges in this new environment, in the new environment. So today I'm really happy to be able to share some insights to what's happening in the Singapore real estate market. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I get started today, I would like to just conduct a short poll just to see what everybody feels about the real estate market in Singapore currently. So I'm just going to launch the poll now. We have 100% of people that answered yes to that question. So it seems that people feel there are some challenges in the Singapore market, and we will be discussing a lot of those with you today. Okay, thank you very much. So without further ado, we'll get started, and I'm going to start with Claudine. So generally, what is the situation in the Singapore real estate market that we're seeing right now?
So as we all know, the Singapore borders are gradually reopened for the first time in 2 long years, right? 2022 is looking to be a very strong year for the rental market. We have vaccinated lanes opening up, not to mention the government announcement last week for more VTL lanes to more countries. And this together with the all-important land VTL with Malaysia, we can expect more expats coming into Singapore to live and work. Property activity in 2021, we'll all agree that, they're primarily driven by local buyers, local demands, and interestingly, the rental market here was buoyant in 2021, even with just limited to domestic demand. So landlords here saw a really strong demand with local tenants, such as millennials who were just looking for their own space amid work from home rules, or couples who aren't willing to put up with long wait for completion of projects. So with the borders opening, demand spiking in 2022, rental rates may increase, and we expect an even faster pace of about 10 to 15% this year.
Okay. And so, Holly, how is this boom affecting the rental market here in Singapore?
Sometimes there's a misconception that during this evolving COVID time that there's actually plenty of supply in the market and rental prices are actually falling. But in fact, the opposite is true. We currently see that demand outstrips supply in the market. We have continued rising rents for the past year, as Claudine touched on, and we have this influx of foreigners coming through on the expanding VTL. In addition, we have locals renting condo units for the first time. This is due to a couple of factors, mainly work from home requirements, which are still the norm in Singapore, and incomplete construction projects island-wide because the migrant workers who work on the construction are still unable to enter the country in any great numbers. So this has created a really perfect storm for our assignees and a number of challenges and issues along the way. So as this slide mentioned, we have a few challenges right now. So the first one is, of course, the increasing rental prices. Another challenge is finding suitable properties, particularly larger properties. So 4-bedroom units, houses and cluster houses are in particularly high demand at the moment. We have landlords being more selective over tenant profiles than they were in the past because they have sometimes a big pool of tenants and multiple offers to choose from. There are also some limitations on viewing tenanted properties right now because we're very dependent on the tenant themselves being present to show the property and also the landlord agent themselves being willing to arrange and be present at the viewing. So for the assignees, this means that for some people are actually now taking properties via video viewings only. So they're not seeing the physical unit before they commit and sign a lease. Obviously, this can lead to a few issues. For example, the property not being in the required condition, or they find some issues with the neighborhood they've selected. So there is an element of risk in the market now. In addition, there's very little decision-making time available. So in the past, we could allow a few days before committing to a lease, but now if we wait that long, it's very likely the property would already be taken. In addition, we've seen an increase in bidding wars for certain properties, particularly the larger ones where there are multiple offers on the table. In my recent experience, I've seen at least 4 to 5 offers on certain properties, and it's usually the most preferred profile by the landlord and the highest rent that will secure the offer. So really the takeaway here is being the fastest to put in a good offer who will secure the property.
Okay, and rental prices, we're seeing rental prices increase, are the prices themselves higher?
Yes, absolutely. Rentals are currently at a 6-year high. And we can see that landlords are really taking advantage of this situation. It really is a landlord's market at the moment. As you can see from this chart, from this rental price index from last year, as you can see, there was a steady rise in the early part of the year in the rental prices, and then a plateau in the middle due to some increased restrictions which were imposed at the time. And then August onwards, when the VTLs resumed and restrictions began to ease, we can see quite an incline in the rental prices. Just in my own personal experience, I can certainly attest to this. You can see my background photo today. This is the condo where I live. It's the view from my window. And even in the same block and in the same configuration of units, I can see that in the last 2 years, and particularly the past year, rents have risen by more than $1,500 per month for the same unit which I'm renting compared to about 2 years ago. I've lived in this condo for 12 years. I'm also a landlord as well as a tenant, and I've certainly never seen anything like this current market that we're in. In terms of official statistics, the Straits Times reported last month that condo rents in general across Singapore have jumped by 10 to 15% in the whole of last year. And that's definitely been the case in our experience as well.
Okay, thank you. And so flicking over to Claudine now. How long are we finding it takes to to find a home these days for our assignees?
So we recommend planning ahead, of course. It's always good to have some information or ideas on the type of housing, a location, a preference. So with these basic housing requirements in place, it should typically take about 2 weeks to a month. However, based on the current market conditions, we're seeing assignees taking longer time to find a home, sometimes up to 2 months. So the timeline needed to identify a home is definitely much longer now. And this is causing a need also to consider further extension for the temporary accommodations. Also to touch on briefly where preview trips are being planned, they do need a lot more advanced planning. A typical full day home viewing will not be possible. Rather, viewing at random for about maybe with 2 to 3 properties are more likely. It may not be possible to secure a property during the trip, but assignees can certainly have a better understanding of what is available and what are the market challenges right now, so that upon their return, they already possibly have a short list of areas or property possibly in mind. So it is certainly going to work in the assignee's interest if they can provide more flexibility also in their schedule during this trip.
Okay, excellent. And what are the popular areas in Singapore right now in terms of where people are wanting to live?
So very often the very first question we want to ask is like, does the assignee want to live like in a quaint walk-up or, a heritage area like Tiong Bahru, or perhaps a apartment house near a beach, East Coast, for example, or stay in a high-rise condo, which is close to your office in the central business district. Also, depending on the family profile, I would say options are endless for most expats living in Singapore. Deciding where to stay in a new country obviously is one of the most important part of the entire relocation journey, and it can be daunting, especially when we have different choices available. Now, to narrow down some of the popular neighborhoods in Singapore, I would say for now, the popular districts are District 9, Orchard, River Valley, District 10, Holland, Bukit Timah, Tanglin, as well as District 11, Novena, Newton, just to name a few.
Okay. And what types of housing are there in these areas? Just for our audience out there that perhaps doesn't know so much about Singapore.
So generally, we can categorize housing in Singapore to 4 different types. We have the most common condo developments. Now, these are properties with facilities, security, gyms, pools, playground. Smaller condominiums may not have as many facilities, but we can expect rental costs for such condominiums typically range for about $2,500 to as much as $10,000 per month. There are, of course, rentals that are above 10,000. These will be for more luxury condo class type. We then have HDB, Housing Development Board flats. These are subsidized housing options, typically for local Singaporeans. Getting hold of one of these are not going to be easy for most expats, as they are typically owned and lived by the local community. So, and not to forget, there is a minimum lease period of 18 months when entering into a contract for HDB flat. Rents can be expected in the range of about $2,000 to $3,500 per month. And then we have standalone houses, commonly known as landed houses in Singapore. We possibly split them into 3 main types. So we have terrace house, semi-detached or detached houses, also known as bungalows. We can expect different rental prices really based on their location and the size of the house. This can vary from about 10,000 to 30,000 per month. And a good class bungalow can easily rent for $40,000 to $50,000 a month. And lastly, we have cluster housing. As Holly has mentioned earlier, it's becoming increasingly sought after. This is a hybrid housing. It's really a unique cross between a low-rise condo and a landed property. So typically a gated community with facilities, of course. Rentals can be expected in a range of about 12,000 to 20,000 per month.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for that overview. Holly, if I would like a house with a pool in Singapore, how much is that going to cost me these days?
So in the current market, a good 4-bedroom house with a pool would cost from an estimated $15,000 per month and upwards. There are also some additional costs associated with this type of property, including pool maintenance, pest control, gardening, and so on. As Claudine mentioned, a cluster house is also a good option at $12,000 upwards, because you have the condo community and facilities, but you still have your own private house. So the larger family homes are in very high demand at the moment, and there is a shortage of these types of properties compared with condos. So these are typically the types of homes where we see the bidding wars, and they're becoming more and more commonplace. So we expect to see at least 5 or more offers on each of these properties.
Okay. Well, having been here in Singapore for nearly 5 years here myself, I've been over to Sentosa a few times. Seems like a really appealing place to live. What's how much is an apartment over in Sentosa Island going to cost me?
So first of all, Sentosa is a very charming, private, exclusive style of living. It is really a resort feel to it. It may be slightly more inconvenient compared to living on the mainland if you do need to commute, for example, for schools or occasional trips to the office. But if you're mainly working from home, then it really does offer a very comfortable and enjoyable and even a unique lifestyle. So for that reason, Sentosa is in very, very high demand as well at the moment. The rental prices vary depending on the condo. A 3-bedroom unit there would easily cost in excess of $10,000 per month. And the rental property supply over there is very limited, and there are no new upcoming construction projects yet. So there's only likely to be a small handful of units available at any one time, and they will be taken quickly.
Okay. And standalone homes as well are popular there as well?
Yes, they are. So these types of properties can easily cost $40,000 per month upwards.
Oh, okay. Won't be living there anytime soon. Okay. Sorry. One more for you, Holly. Can I find, if I just had around 4,000 Singapore dollars, could I find a 3-bedroom unit, somewhere here in Singapore?
It's not impossible, but it would be quite challenging at the moment. In this market, it would only be possible to find a 3-bedroom unit in this price range in the northern areas of Singapore and the eastern side. So these would be quite outlying areas. The larger family homes in this price bracket are under a very high demand at the moment. And in addition, a tenants commission or finder's fee would be applicable in this budget range. So the amount payable would be 1 month's rental equivalent for a 2-year lease.
Okay. Thank you. Flicking over to Claudine. Just Claudine, how many properties can we view in a day these days? Now I know traditionally back before COVID, we were able to see sort of 8 to 10 properties a day. How are things, in the market at the moment, with this challenging market at the moment?
So right now, it is really dependable on availability. So based on current viewing challenges we're experiencing, I would say if you're lucky, 2 to 3 property viewings a day, sometimes lesser. We did experience viewings being cancelled the morning before the scheduled trip, where offers are being received overnight. So as we mentioned before, flexibility is required from the assignee schedule. Property viewings cannot be predetermined now by the tenant, unfortunately, as this is pretty much determined by the current tenant or the landlord's rep schedule. So another also important point to note now is when planning for a preview trip, we cannot guarantee how many properties we can show, or even if there are properties to show. Or those that would fit within their requirements. So planning ahead, again, the keynote to everything we do right now, and flexibility as well.
Okay. So what would be your tips for navigating through this, this current market? What are some things people can do to, to sort of, I guess, improve their chances of being able to secure a place to live?
So in this new climate, we strongly advise assignees need to react and respond quickly, especially when they come across a property that they like, right? The idea really is to have a good realtor who's able to accurately assess and know the assignee's needs quickly, fine-tune the search, well, and such that opportunity is not lost. This is really critical in the current fast-moving market we're seeing here, where there is limited supply. And this is one of the highlights, which Holly will elaborate later, is for assignees to consider paying finder's fee. Right now, priority is finding a place within assignee's budget. It is not about manipulating pricing. Rental prices are really challenging and hard to negotiate right now. The maximum negotiations realtors are seeing, it's about maybe 5 to 8%. And by presenting a lower offer, it is likely to lose the place to someone who is willing to pay more. So keep the search realistic, make offers at asking where possible, and don't waste time looking at options that are over budget. Offer a genuine closing, especially if we're competing with multiple competitive offers. And lastly, expect to compromise, holding out for a ideal property may not be an option in a hot market. It may be smarter to approach home finding by thinking about ways how you could make a good enough home work for you. Flexible expectations can give more options, and in a real in a hot real estate market right now, think about what's most important now and focus on the key requirements when conducting home search.
Okay, thank you very much for that advice. I'm just going to very quickly pull up a second poll now with regards to what people might feel is going to happen in 2022. So I'm just going to launch this right now. Okay, well, thank you everybody in the audience. Here is what everybody thought. So overwhelmingly, everybody thinks that all of these things will be a factor in terms of what we'll see in 2022. So Holly, over to you, and perhaps you can address what everybody thinks about what's going to happen in 2022. Is this what you think is going to happen also?
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with the majority of the poll. So all of the above. We do anticipate the situation to become more acute during this year. We see there will be further competition for the already scarce number of properties available, and we expect prices to continually rise. As the border restrictions continue to ease, we expect more expats to be coming into Singapore. And although there is newer construction of condos underway, it will be some time before these are completed and will ease the supply availability. Our key takeaway today then is there are a number of challenges in the current market, and we are seeing this emerging trend towards payment of tenant commission. So firstly, on the supply side and the viewing side, we've been seeing some increasing challenges over the past few months, particularly in relation to viewings. We've networked with a number of landlord realtors and found out on the ground what's actually happening. What we've seen is that landlord agents are now tending to prioritize viewers for properties in a particular order. So the first viewing priority is now going to direct tenants with no representative tenant agent. The second priority is going to tenants who are represented by a realtor, but where the landlord's agent does not need to share any commission with the tenant's agent, which has always been the market practice for properties which are over $4,000 per month. There's also a trend towards a viewing priority for those who are sharing commission between the two agents, but where the tenant has a preferred profile or is offering a higher rent. So this is the first barrier when we're actually trying to arrange property viewings. The second key thing is the emerging trend, which is towards the payment of tenants' commission. So in the current market, as we've touched on previously, it's been a long-standing market practice for tenants to pay a commission or finder's fee to their realtor if the rent is at $4,000 and below per month. But in this market, what we're seeing is that this tenant's commission is payable for anywhere upwards of $4,000 per month, so even in the $10,000 plus range. In the current market, it's very beneficial to have a representative tenant realtor because it greatly helps with the property screening, the viewing arrangements, the handover support, and also the condition reporting and support during the lease term. So there's a couple of options for assignees in the situation where tenants' commission is payable. The first one is to ensure that we can carry out a full and comprehensive home search is for the assignee to pay the tenants' commission themselves or possibly have support from the client company to pay this for them. This will ensure that we're able to do all the property screening and follow all the necessary processes and provide full support to the assignee. The other option would be if the tenant or the client company declines to pay the commission, we will still provide the full realtor support, but the number of properties shown would be decreased because we can only show properties where a co-broking or sharing of commission between the two agents is possible. So this is something we've been noticing over the past few months, and this is something which is set to continue during 2022. So in conclusion then, as we've mentioned, the prices are continuing to rise across Singapore, and the market is markedly different compared to 18 months or 2 years ago.
Okay, so I think, in order to, secure a property, what we're probably seeing is that it would be wise to be for either the assignee or the assignee's company to be able to pay that tenant commission. Is that correct? That's going to help people to secure properties and help people to get sort of more options, within a very limited supply. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and in terms of that commission, how much is the commission that we're talking about for those properties that are over $4,000?
Yes, roughly speaking, it will be half a month's rent.
Okay, and under 4,000, it's always been a full month's rent. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, so I think that is what we're seeing here is that Singapore has traditionally been a market whereby tenants have not had to pay a commission. That it's slowly moving towards. I don't think it's a commission is payable in 100% of cases yet, but it's definitely moving towards a location whereby a tenant commission is going to be necessary, and perhaps that's going to become the market standard as we move through this in the next period of time. Do we see? Is there any indication of this situation getting better in 2022? What's your feeling on that, Holly? Do you think you think things are going to cool off a little bit later in the year, or?
At this point, no, I don't see any improvement in the situation. I would say things are continuing as they are, possibly getting a little more challenging because the amount of properties available to rent is so low. And we do know that there are more foreigners coming in. There's a gradual expansion of the VTL lane, so we don't see any significant easing of the situation. There were some government measures at the end of last year to cool the property market in general, but this was more aimed at the buying and selling side of the market, not the renting side. So there's been largely no impact there.
Right, okay. Claudine, you don't see things easing up anytime soon either?
No, I'm going to second what Holly's just said. We're not expecting situation to get any better. On the contrary, we're going to expect a fierce challenge out there in the real estate market.
Right. Okay. So, I think for any sort of, any of our corporate clients, or for any of the RMC members that have joined today, I think it's going to be important to start having conversations with with the companies that we work with in terms of, them, supporting the payment of tenant commissions going forward, or, people are going to be a little bit disappointed, I think, in terms of the properties that are, one, the properties that are available to view, and then two, the properties that, they're actually, the options they're going to have to be able to, to secure anything. All right. We do have 2 or 3 questions that have come through. We were talking about prices just now. There's a question, is this in US dollars or Singapore dollars? I believe we were talking in Singapore dollars today for the entirety of the presentation. So sorry for those of you who perhaps base things in US dollars, but this is the Singapore rental market, so we've been talking in Singapore dollars. Okay, we have another question. You mentioned in many cases direct renters, no realtor in the middle, are being prioritised by landlords, but you also recommend using an experienced realtor to help navigate the market. How should assignees reconcile the conflict between those two things? So, going directly to an owner agent versus using a tenant agent. Perhaps Holly, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, like we mentioned, it is definitely beneficial to have the support of an experienced realtor throughout this process. What we see on Property Guru, our main portal in Singapore, is that there are a lot of fake listings still, and viewings are very, very challenging to arrange. So having that support in those initial stages, it is very, very advantageous. Just yesterday, for example, we secured a property because the realtor was able to jump ahead of the queue and get our assignees to be the first viewing, and they actually took the property. But in the case where it's the tenant directly working with the realtor, is quite likely they could lose the property. So although there is this prioritization process in place by some landlord agents, having a good realtor can definitely help navigate through those situations.
Okay. Claudine, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Holly has mentioned, most of the realtors will have a good understanding of how the market is working, whom they're dealing with, if they are authentic listings on the portals. But more recently than not, we're seeing a lot of landlords rep who are marketing their property way above market rental. And this is just a tactic that they are all approaching to filter out inquiries, genuine inquiries that they would rather deal with versus, we understand they're getting like 50, 60, 70 inquiries with an overnight listing. And if you do have a realtor who is assisting you in the process, they are able to, work with you to assure you that if this is the correct market price and, what would be a good price point to go in, and if you should make an offer. They also have the advantage, the knowledge of the background information of the property itself and the past transactions. So again, I do emphasize on engaging a realtor to assist in this whole process.
Okay, thank you for that. We have one other question here, which is comes from a slightly different perspective. So people considering living in Malaysia now that the borders are opening, and I think pre-COVID times we did have a lot of we did have some people that were perhaps commuting from Malaysia. I don't think that is that commute is possible quite yet. But Claudine, are you hearing people considering living in Malaysia now the borders are open?
Not that I have experienced, and I think we have to put a lot of considerations, especially for families. I mean, as our neighbors, of course, across the border, Singapore, in terms of security, the provisions of international school that's available here, it's a vast difference, right? So these are considerations. It's not just about getting a more affordable property across the border. It's how the family would be able to continue to live a lifestyle like from before. So there are several factors, and I would say for the inconvenience of commuting in and out across the borders, we're really unsure how this arrangement is going to be like in the near future, whether traffic will be eased further. As of now, it doesn't seem to be a feasible arrangement.
Right. Holly, any comments from your side from what you've heard from folk?
Yes, as Claudine mentioned, the commute could be a significant issue, and of course we never know what's going to happen with the borders. So another alternative could be to consider more of those outlying areas of Singapore, for example the north, where property prices are much lower, and there are also lower cost international schools to consider if cost is a key factor driving the decision to live in Malaysia.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, what else do we have here? On the point on landlord selective over tenant profiles, we have seen some landlords are very selective and do not want to rent out to Indian expats. Has this worsened now that the property market is a landlord market? Claudine, maybe I can have you answer this one.
Yes, sadly, unfortunately, this has worsened. Well, it's also very much due to landlords having the choice now, right? Having multiple inquiries coming in and offers as well. It's inevitable that they have the benefit of choosing and selecting, be selective rather, whom they prefer to lease their place to. So there is really, unfortunately, there's no solution to that at this present moment. We just have to ask for the Chinese understanding, and this does not necessarily always apply to Indian nationalities. We have had other challenges with some other nationalities as well.
Yeah, so I believe there's quite a bit of this profiling going on, Holly, and I think pets are also causing a bit of an issue as well. Is that correct?
Yes. Just as an example, for a recent home search I did, out of around 60 listings and landlord agents that we contacted, only around 10 of them would accept pets. And of those, some of the properties had already been taken. So the number of properties available to show was incredibly limited. The assignee did choose a property very quickly, though. They were very decisive and flexible in their requirements. So the home search was swift and successful for that reason.
Okay, looks like we might have another question here. As there would be an increase in property taxes, especially for non-owner occupied properties, will we foresee these to be passed on to tenants? So a question, I believe that the tax rates might be increased by the Singaporean government on the owners themselves. Do you think that this will probably be passed on to them? I think is the question.
I think this is actually we have seen the trend going that the rental prices are increasingly on the high end. There's to some extent that this has been passed on to the tenants' costs as well, but it's not visible, obviously, and we can expect this possibly going to be a something to consider, that more than likely landlords are going to impose that,
Right.
you know, indirectly into the rentals. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that there's also, in terms of acquiring a property in Singapore, if you have several properties, that sort of thing, that acquiring properties, there are more costs involved now and higher, acquisition type taxes that the Singapore government is enforcing to try as a sort of a cool down measure. But I guess that's going to, in the end, get passed on to the people that are renting those properties. Do you think that would be correct, Holly?
Yes, ultimately, we're yet to see an actual correlation between the two. But at the moment, at this present time, I would say the price hike is really closely correlated with the extreme demand that we're seeing and the shortage of properties. Perhaps when there are more new condos released, things may relax a little, but then eventually, of course, we've got the taxes coming in, and any hikes could well be passed on. I think it's worth noting as well that for foreigners in Singapore to buy a property as an EP holder, for example, the stamp duty has recently been raised to 30%. So it's prohibited a large number of foreigners from buying altogether.
Right. Okay. Another question has come in, and I'm surprised. I'm just reading. I was surprised to hear how high the rents have become. How can regular or sort of local hire, foreign residents afford to rent an apartment? Any thoughts on that one?
Yes, so we do have a number of assignees who are on a local package. Again, it's good to look in slightly less central areas. So, for example, the eastern side of Singapore, you can get a lot more space for your budget. So considering a longer commute and perhaps a little bit further away from school may be a good option. I think the key is to really study the market, understand the areas, really refine your requirements, and then once you're comfortable with your budget and what's available, then to make an offer.
All right. Well, we're coming to the end here. I'm just going to ask one more question here, and then I think we'll close up for today. So lastly, how long, in terms of length, is a typical or a standard lease in Singapore, and what are some of the challenges posed by the length of leases? For example, if somebody wants to rent a property for just a 12-month period or a 6-month period, how does that affect things in this market today? Perhaps Claudine, if you want to comment on that.
Right. So a typical lease period, and of course, most favorable by most landlord, it will be a 2-year lease, more so than ever now. We're seeing landlords objecting or rejecting most of the short-term leases, and an alternative to that would be, I've seen several cases whereby signees came in with, not being decisive or unsure where they should live. So henceforth, a shorter term lease period is more comfortable in the event they should, they've made a wrong selection of location. In this situation, we're very often we are actually suggesting sort of like a corporate service apartment leasing, where minimally 3 months leases is mandatory. So it gives them the flexibility to consider long-term leases after they get to know Singapore a little bit better, more comfortable on the locations they want to stay. So there are alternatives here. They are still very much affected by supply. However, this is a good option to consider when you are looking at short-term leases.
Okay. And Holly, have you had anybody that's perhaps been looking for the standard being a 24-month lease? If you had people that have been looking for a 12-month lease, and has that been challenging?
Yes, it's been very challenging. I think in the past 6 months, I've only had one assignee who's been able to secure a 1-year lease. And in that case, there was no room for price negotiation, and no requests were being granted by the landlord. So it really is a landlord's market if you're looking for a 1-year lease. So as Claudine's mentioned, a good option is a serviced apartment, or companies like ST Residences who offer shorter term leasing opportunities.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you both very much. I hope this has been informative for our audience today. Reload Asia will continue to do these webinars on a monthly basis on a variety of topics. It's been great to join everybody today to talk about the Singapore market, which is becoming more and more challenging, as you've heard. So thank you very much for joining today, and we hope you can join our webinars in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.